We are going to get started with Leigh Anne Couch. Every Lash, winner of the 2020 Vassar Miller Prize in Poetry and just out, is Leigh Anne Couch's second collection, following Houses Fly Away, published by Zone 3 Press. Her poems are published widely in magazines including Pank, Gulf Coast, Subtropic, Smartish Pace, Nell, and Cincinnati Review. Formerly at Duke University Press and the Swanee Review, she is now a freelance editor. Welcome, Leigh Anne, and congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you, Leah. This is such an honor to be here. And it's, even though I haven't read by Zoom before, and this is the best way to begin with friends. I'm going to read about 5 or 6 poems, and a lot of them are nostalgic for Swanee. So this first one features the reservoir, which if you've been to the conference in the early years when we were allowed to go out there, you'll remember the reservoir. This first one is called Youth. When soft was the sun and Neruda was the night, I was 25 and keeping the secret, a forbidden pet I fed from the contents of my chest. And in that windy closet it curled, a pulse of glistening fur. Windy was the weather at 25, when I wanted my skin to taste the world and never wanted to sleep. I nursed the secret into unearned joy when soft was the sun and Neruda was the night. But the years kept coming, exacting a debt I'll never repay. The more time you're given, my young husband says, the more you have to lose. The rich don't want to pay taxes, and the middle-aged don't want to die. In too deep, we must press on, for death never fit so well as it did at 25, when you and I swam naked at dusk in the reservoir. This next one, so the first 3 or 4 poems really are about youth. This next one is not such a peaceful one, and it's called Teen Hunger. A story by way of introduction, a story as proof you understand, a story by which to connect, to stage a life, to misdirect. This is none of those. I took what was offered because finally it was offered. My longing to be longed for was incorrigible. I didn't know what I wanted because I didn't know. I guess I wanted the bruises where they wouldn't show, made by a stranger who was the friend of the boy on the other side of the bathroom door. The boy waiting for what? The boy whose idea this was. Just back from Paris, he'd made friends with the Englishman and made money for wine, drawing caricatures on the street. So I can see how the girl I wanted to be said yes, though being asked is only part of what I don't remember. The chain is still on, and the door won't open all the way on one of those nights where everyone wanted so bad to feel good that meanness ranged freely. I was there so the artist could fuck the Englishman. The artist was there so the Englishman could fuck a stranger. The Englishman was there for his appetites. A bite mark around my nipple, purplish fingerprints flourishing at my hip bones made me viable. I can tell you that. I want to tell you more, but the girl inside won't take the chain off the door. She's afraid of what you won't see, the humor in it all. This cosmopolitan proposition in practice at a seamy Ramada in Atlanta, the rub-a-dub-dub, 3 of us in a tub, the sickly light, and none of us drunk enough. Or maybe she's afraid you'll see her crying and mistake it for shame. I don't think it was shame, more like despair. The hunger still there, and nothing about her changed. Now this next one it has Italian in it, and I don't speak Italian. I can kind of understand it. But it's important that I read the epigraph. It's a response to a poem by Eugenio Montale, and the poem is called The Lemons. So the title of the poem is My Dream of You Isn't Over, and the epigraph from Montale is Sono I silenzi in cui si vede in ogni ombra umana che si allontana qualche disturbata divinità. These are the silences in which one sees in each retreating human shade some surprised divinity. From this high castle, I hear a single bird singing far below. I long to be small in the grass and darkened by il giorno più languisce. Yet I can no more to you translate my Via Toscana at the turn of the century than I can be translated years later from this tabletop Tennessee into the folds of San Gimignano, where I climbed the towers alone, with Claire below in a miasma of Chianti and gnocchi from the night before, in Orvieto, and those fumes from the bus as it whipped back and forth, rising through the gorge of hills. Bellissima, no? On either side. We were young, but afraid youth was ending. We ranged through the land of the Etruscans, sleeping with men and women along the way. Piero had a dog named Virgil, I remember. We lay across the laps of coal-eyed boys in a cab, singing Old Journey through the narrow streets of Florence to deconsecrated dance clubs. The next day we wanted the sea, and Italy gave us a car. Was money exchanged? Could they even see us? I didn't take a single picture. I can write, it was the season of asparagus and lemons, though it may not have been. Saturated in the fields, green as blood, between Siena, Pienza, Montepulciano to Liguria, I never felt more myself when certain I had disappeared. Cyprus becomes wind, becomes breath, and the traveler is translated to il punto morto del mundo, the still point of the world, as Galassi translates Montale. But I prefer Millicent Bell, the blind spot of the world. For the poet disappears through these fissures in the Tower of Babel. Finally, worthless as a sparrow, I was a self without precedent, inimitable and rare, more clearly defined against that foreign backdrop than I ever would be again. You can tell that's a poem of a young person who never takes pictures. I mean, now if I had a chance to go to Italy, I would take pictures constantly. So this next one is shorter, and I want to dedicate it to Wyatt if he's here. I want him to know that all of these birds' names are made up. I know that they're not real birds. Okay, it's called Bird in a Boat. Well, not all of them are made up, some of them. My goldfinch, house wren, lapwing, tin whistle swallow, apple-cheeked meadowlark, yellow-bellied flicker, why don't you sing? My ginger bunting, bloody tanager, leaky oriole, my Falstaffian jay, why does your wing scrape the dust that way? Your hiatus, grounded and mute, is taking root, a loose strife, studying the bitter yards of mill houses. You'd want to know hiatus comes from the Latin to yawn, always a drowsy bird. Now you sleep from dawn to dark. My nighthawk, vespertine, short-eared, delicately flammulated owl, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? What do you do, my battered canoe, on the Black Sea night after night? Would it help to know none of us are made true? A speck out of sync in this mess up ahead, and the mind is a bird in a boat searching for land, futile excursion in the dark, where we lose our little canoe again and again. Okay, so I'm gonna read two more, and this one is for my youngest son because it features some of his language at the end. He's very proud of it. The title comes from a line that I found in an old review that Randall Jarrell wrote on Eleanor Ross Taylor's poetry. He made all of these strange assertions, which are nice, but weren't a lot about her work. But what he said was, life is a state of siege, a war to the last woman. Of all the gin joints and all the towns and all the world, I walk into his and right back out again to call my family. It's going to be a while. I need this drink with this man from 2 lives and 3 towns back, where spoons and forks tangle the yards. His hands on my body I don't need, but I might have hidden parts of myself in him. So let me flesh out my past. on those Revolutionary War streets where I rented rooms for nothing in an old boarding house, becoming the only tenant and caretaker of rabbits and yellow jackets simmering in ground nests. I need this man, who is not my husband, to break in my heart its love of endings, its longing for the dying engines of twilight when the dishes are clean, the laundry folded, the boys asleep. Not only childhoods get mislaid in the terror of afternoons strangled into meaninglessness. What would that girl who ate bread and cheese under a bridge on a dirty beach with strangers want with my life? How I miss her and the letter writer, lizard of many, dance hall girl, lugger of sandstone, stacker of wood, thrift queen, bookstore haunt, tinkerer of spaces. My dear companions dwindled to one, siloed and happy, mother wife, home soon. For now I long to be fluid, a tributary for all those selves rushing and laughing into our home. I know you all would love me. This old boyfriend with eager eyes writes his number on a napkin and I take it. I take it to mean it's time to pack up, return those rooms to vacancy, strip the sheets, bank the fire, turn the knob quietly on my own sleeping house, and climb into bed with my youngest. Go blank with the warm, damp smell of him. His words thick and dream clogged. Have you had enough of me, Mama? Burst my heart, that ripe fig. And this last one is called Kill All Parents. And this one is for my husband. It's one of my favorite songs that Child A and Child B sang on the street from Family Fang. And so this is kind of my interpretation of it. Let me find it. Okay. So the title of the poem is Kill All Parents, and the little epigraph under it is, you say that now. Kill all parents. Children are meant to kill us. We hope kindly, but dead. Any lozenge of mercy would be merely patronizing, a brief stay. For 20 minutes, our children abide the deepest, most sustaining love their blankness can receive. For 20 years, they crush our hearts. Here it is written, their love for us, and I mean that helpless, blinding, vertiginous, irresistible needle ends at their own perfection. Anything else is blighted stone fruit at our feet. I know my love will be made quaint, then ridiculous, then obsolete. I know this because I daughter a very good mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh Anne. That was wonderful.
You're welcome.
Our next reader is Juliana Gray. Juliana Gray's third poetry collection is Honeymoon Palsy. Recent poems have appeared in or are forthcoming from Poetry Northwest, the Chattahoochee Review, and elsewhere. Her humor writing has appeared in McSweeney's Internet Tendency and is very funny. Google it immediately if you haven't read it. An Alabama native, she lives in Western New York and teaches at Alfred University. Welcome, Juliana.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming. I was just scrolling through the participant list and there's so many old friends here. This is really, really wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. I'm not happy to be reading after Leigh Anne because that was amazing. I don't really want to follow that, but Leigh Anne, I'm glad that you already dropped the F-bomb, so it'll be less upsetting when I do it.
Good.
I'm going to read 5 poems, and I'm going to be reading from my screen, so it's going to be slightly creepy for you all. I think it'll look like I'm staring right at you, so you have that to look forward to. I'm going to start with a couple that are darker, and I'm going to move toward a little lighter, maybe some humor. So I'm going to start with one. These are all newer poems that aren't in any of my books so far. I'm just going to start with one that's combining a couple of subjects I've been writing about lately. One is true crime, which I've always been interested in. Erica Dawson is here. She and I have watched many an episode of Forensic Files together, so she knows what I'm talking about. And also my mother is getting older and dealing with some form of dementia. She hasn't really gotten a diagnosis yet, but the one thing that she has been diagnosed with is logopenic primary progressive aphasia, which is a mouthful, but it means that she's having trouble with language. The language centers of her brain are deteriorating. So it's hard for her to find the words that she wants. It's very difficult for her to read. It's increasingly difficult for her to speak. So language is just kind of leaving her. So the first poem I'm going to read combines those interests, which I know sounds strange, but here we go. So this is called After My Mother is Diagnosed with Primary Progressive Aphasia, I Watch a True Crime Documentary. Something has been taken. A woman sits beside a black Bakelite phone. She worries a rope of dull pearls, touches her hand to her hair, held together with artful pins. Something has been stolen. A ladder was found leaning against the house. An open window, an empty bed, the flag of a torn curtain waving for help. The woman crosses the room and frets at a doorknob, angry that she's forgotten why she rose, what she was seeking, the name of what or whom she's lost. How long ago? If the telephone rings, how will she answer it? A parlor clock ticks. In the distance, bloodhounds cry in an ecstasy of evidence. The authorities have all been notified. The lines have been tapped. They're waiting with her somewhere, monitoring the situation. Someone will call with breathy instructions or slip a note beneath her door, its deranged letters cut and glued from things that happened yesterday. And the next one is, I should give a little content warning. This one describes a school shooting. I wrote this shortly after the Parkland shooting. This is called A Partial Catalog of Things I Used to Be Able to Do. Touch my toes, of course. Hold my breath in the deep end for almost 2 minutes, then burst the blue surface and earn my mother's worried smile. I could draw freehand a map of Western Europe. I don't want to brag, but I once hula hooped for a solid hour, mosquitoes sipping from my ankles as dusk shouldered in. I used to be able to teach an entire poetry class without imagining a heralding crack of gunfire advancing up the stairs, telling my students to hide under their plastic desks, locking the door if, in this imagining, I remembered my keys. If not, trying to hold it closed, no doubt failing. A bone crash as my students, those breakable children, scream. I could recite the names of each of Zeus's sons, each daughter. I used to whistle like the airiest bird. Okay, that's as dark as I'm gonna get. And now I'll get a little lighter. So it's been a long time since we were staffers at Sewanee, and Leigh Anne and Cecily have gone on to have these wonderful families. I have not. There's a cat in my lap right now. It is far too hot for that. It's very uncomfortable, but that's as close as I've come. And this next poem is kind of riffing on that. And it's one of those where the title goes into the first line of the poem, so I'll just read it all together. This is skipping a friend's barbecue because the invitation said family friendly, which means there will be screaming. Normal kid screaming, not pain or fear screaming, just running screaming, running with a stick screaming, running with a barbecue fork screaming, oops, there's the pain screaming. And now there are tears and blood beads on a knee and other fluids tragically leaking. I'd have to wade through to reach the adults sipping beers around the grill and talking about, of course, the children. That's been the topic all day. Their latest allergies and scrapes, vacation ER waiting rooms, casts wrapped in the brightly colored gauze of their choice. And if I tried to shift topics, say, did you see the Golden State Killer appeared in court again last week? I'd get the look, which means my conversational gambit was not appropriate, not family friendly. Hot dogs. Potato salad that no one trusts after the first hour. Then different tears, deep hurt tears, an urchin at her mother's knee snitching that another child, hiding behind his father's chair, declared that he did not like the girl, her face was ugly, and he would never be friends with her henceforth. Poor kid, she really believes it, cannot foresee a life in which she won't be lonely and unloved. I'm home, sipping tea, imagining the girl's profound sorrow. The only thing I know about children is that I used to be one. Okay. You've got two more. This one's fairly short. This is in honor of all of us getting so much older and yet remaining so good looking. This is playlist for a 60th birthday. And I think some of you are going to catch an allusion in the first line. Playlist for the 60th birthday. We built a brick house and burned down the house. Everyone was a dancing queen with a heart of glass. Some took a break to rest and chug cups of water, while a few brought sexy back. We did the Macarena, though no one could remember learning how. A couple in their 80s stood, angled toward each other as if sheltering a lit match, and for a solid 60 seconds struggled with the zippers on their coats. We celebrated, we would survive, and oh, we partied like it's 1999. Okay. And this is my last one. This one has an epigraph. It is not from Montali. It's from the podcast.
Computer, I won't affect, doesn't affect.
Oops.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. The last one that has an epigraph, not from an exciting literary source, but from the podcast My Favorite Murder. One of the hosts is a comedian named Karen Kilgariff. So the epigraph is a line that she spoke on the podcast, and she said, "Can't you see from my really thick black eyeliner that I'm nobody's mother?" And so the poem is called Nobody's Mother. Can't you see I've trimmed my home in sharp corners and glass? Don't you hear me saying fuck in every fucking sentence? Can't you see these cracks and lines around my sideways mouth were not inscribed by laughter? No locks on the stove, no controls on online porn. Electric outlets gape for exploratory fork or finger. What the fuck is Go-Gurt? Here are my rickety stairs. Here my long deferred roof, bucking up rusty nails. Here's my liquor cabinet, a proudly shining congregation beside the household poisons. Here is my standard human heart, beating only for itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Shining congregation, huh?
I mean, some people like Dusties. Clean.
Okay, our next reader is Cecily Parks. Cecily is at work on a third collection of poetry, poems from which appear in The New Yorker, The New Republic, and Best American Poetry 2020. Oh, congratulations, Cecily. She edits the poetry section of ISLE Interdisciplinary Studies in Literature and Environment and teaches in the MFA program at Texas State University. Welcome, Cecily.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Leigh Anne, for bringing us all together. It's really, really wonderful. I'm so excited for this new book, Caki, for your new book, but also to be in this sort of two-dimensional space with all of you makes me really happy. It's one of those weird silver linings of this time, I think. I structured my reading for tonight around Leigh Anne, which sounds creepy when I say it out loud, but it's too late now. The first poem I'll read is one I wrote probably around the time I met Leigh Anne. And I was going to say, I was young enough to write a poem addressing a Luna moth, but poets love to address things that don't talk back. So I can't really blame it on youth, I don't think. This one is called Luna Moth. Pale green and pressed against the window screen, shot through with field, you watch with 4 white eyes the nighttime's corners curl, your under self unfurled to my one room of world. Kettle, counter, knife block. Having lived one of your life's 6 nights, you live a limp silhouette where you left off. Let me be the creature circling your sleep. I am the most benign unknown. I do not touch. With what nights are left, plant your wing beat in my sleep. Be the only hovering thing. If only you could teach me survival without sustenance, unworried love, how to find oneself at a window one morning and think nothing of what happens next. That was a poem from my first book, and sort of my investment or love of the natural world has continued into my second as well. I think that the speaker in the poems is often trying to negotiate a love of the natural world and a love of someone, another person who happens to dwell inside, as most of us do, and trying to figure out, if she can love both. This poem is called Hurricane Song. The pines dizzying for a hurricane, the wind so hotly twirls their skirts and underskirts, unnerves their pine cones, ratchets up and up their branches into needle-spangled, needle-spraying plumes. The white running sunlight falls and tumbles through the meadow, rattling the grass. The meadow sweeps me up in its arms so that I lose track of east and feel that little kidnapped thrill that comes with drastic weather. Oh, almost wilderness, will the hurricane hunt this far inland for our green juice? I guess yes. The meadow guesses wet where it laps up against the soft remnants of wall. The clouds guess wind behind the swervy treetops. Blue jays vanish in the orchard's green. A deer flips herself over and over, white tail spark, black hoof sparks, brown wheel. The clouds guess again, shadows blooming and wilting in the grass, latticed branch shadow modeling the road. The sound of kisses increases through the forest, switchy sticks. The forest has loved itself long enough to do this. Is now when I should love myself into a safer place? Or is this the place where love makes me safe? I guess yes and yes. Spastic gods, the grasshoppers manifest on the margins of errant leaves and spring into bright nothing. Where do they come from? Where do they go? The wild strawberries guess wind. The wind guesses wind. The grass guesses grass, tossing all of us. I have one more poem in this collection that I actually wrote with Leigh Anne in mind. I think, Leigh Anne, when I first met you, it was your buoyant energy that just always drew me to you, made me want to be your friend, but also, kept you in my life as sort of an inspiration for how to be a poet and how to be in a community of writers. And but there was also just always this lightness and this energy that I so valued, even when we were tired at Sewanee on staff or hadn't slept enough or were hungover. I think it was always there. Somehow thinking of that led to this poem. Girls ride shotgun in the ice cream truck. They sing along to the jingle they know by heart, by shin, by skin. Waking is to happiness as the trash can is to raccoons, and then some. Without pockets, they plumb the freezer for what fills the yellowing billows their hand-me-down aprons make. Rocket ship popsicles, varieties of sprinkles, sugar cones on the verge of brittle. What melts makes them run, because if the changing of states isn't the universe's promise of a love abundant as a spider plant, it might be something better. Once dogged, the mundane refrains from their bare heels. Their paths give and give. It's the day before the longest day of the year. It's late summer. It's their birthday. It's snowing, and they've never heard of winter. All right, I'm going to read two poems from the new collection in progress. I'm going to do what Juliana described as staring right at you, because I'm going to read off the screen. One is short and one is a little longer. These will be my last two. If I can find them. This poem is called Girlhood, and it has a running title, and the title runs into the poem. Girls are obviously a theme in tonight's reading. Girlhood. Girlhood was when I slept in the woods, bareheaded beneath jagged stars and the membranous near misses of bats. When I tasted watercress, wild carrot, and sorrel. When I was known by the lilac I hid beside, and when that lilac, burdened by my expectations of lilacs, began a journey without me. As when the dirt road sang, "Oh, Rugosa Rose, farewell," and ran behind the clipped white pine hedge into the immeasurable heartbreaks of the field. And this will be my last poem. Leigh Anne and Patch are in it. I was lucky enough to have children right around when Leigh Anne had Patch, and Patch is one of the children in this poem, and Leigh Anne is the friend I am drinking wine with. December. It was never supposed to snow here, and yet it was snowing. Big flakes tearing down over the Edwards Plateau like the sky had crumbled. My friend and I drank cold wine while our children played inside with masks on a big white bed. Another afternoon, my daughters sang a song about lords and camp that I didn't understand, but they didn't like me to ask what it meant, and instead of answering, rolled down the hill in their pajamas. Their first secret. Then, first bright red manicure, first chipped nail, first note taped to the door saying, "Don't come in." I went to the museum instead and stared a long time at the draft on which Anne Sexton had scrawled, "At last I found you, you funny old story poem," and felt a happy envy, happy for her, but not for me. Then, first time on ice skates, chicking around the rink, a string of beads draped over one daughter's head and my gold necklace still tangled by the sink. Snow rolled over the prairie and held the fence shadows when we threw golden hay to the ponies who lived outside all winter. The black and white barn cat was still alive and ate nervously in the garage, where snow chains glittered on the floor. One night I told a restaurant it was my husband's birthday and they gave us a sundae. It was his birthday, and at this point we were far from the Edwards Plateau. I can't remember when we left for that trip, but I know on the last day of December we had to go home. And in the airport, waiting for the plane, I arranged our winter coats so that mine was holding everyone else's. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecily. That was terrific. Our next reader is Caki Wilkinson, whose book Indeed comes out. Her new book Indeed comes out in June. So again, we're celebrating Leigh Anne's book that is out now and Caki's book that's coming out in June. Caki is the author of the poetry collections, Circles Where the Head Should Be, and the Winona Stone poems. Recent work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Nation, and Kenyon Review, and her third collection, The Survival Expo, will be published in June. She lives in Memphis. Hi, Caki.
Hi. Kevin just texted me, set me up, Caki, don't mess it up for me. Sorry, Kevin, I outed you. I thank you, Leah, and thank you, Leigh Anne, and thank you, Cecily and Juliana. It's always it's good to see you guys, but the first readings I ever gave were at Sewanee before anyone wanted to hear me read anything. And I remember reading, I think my first year with Cecily and having to follow Cecily and being like so afraid of that. But it's really great to see all your faces. And I have had the pleasure of getting to read Leigh Anne's book already, and it's so good. So I hope you all will go out and buy it. I'm actually reading, I have an ARC of my book. This is the first time I've read from it, so I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm going to read 5 poems. I'm going to try my best to set Kevin up. This is a poem. There's a series of poems in this book that run through the book that feature a character named Hope, and the speaker of the poem is her cousin. So this is the first of those, and it's called A Supermarket in Tennessee, playing off of Allen Ginsberg's really much better poem, A Supermarket in California. So A Supermarket in Tennessee. The morning after my cousin Hope won $200 for beating the crap out of a woman on stage at Blanchard's, I went to Kroger. I used to worship her, older, taller, tougher, my very own ego's fog machine. But there I was, freezing my ass off while I looked for what she needed. It'd been a week of new laws, headlines reading, wine in groceries, guns on campus, both sides still buzzing, righteous, a little bit appeased. Hope called to say her eye was swollen shut, and who was I to judge? Hadn't I huffed my share of duster? Didn't I make a boyfriend sexy magnets of me in hot pink underwear and different outfits he could change? He stuck them on his mini fridge, and there's no telling who all saw, but even then I knew I'd never run for office. Hope took the pictures for me. This was before I left for college, before the Kroger was a Kroger, just a rundown store where Hope got caught stealing blueberries. My mother said that was the moment things went south, as if someone suddenly starts stealing blueberries. I want to claim I haven't been unkind. There is so much that mortifies us later. I don't think about what happened to the magnets. I don't think about the students I should arm myself against. Who knows what's worth $200 once you're 6 drinks in at Blanchard's? They call it foxy boxing. Hope's face was puffed up worse than I expected, but of course I lied and said it wasn't bad. I brought her what she wanted, a box of white and ice. As kids, our favorite game was Diner. I cut and glued the menu's paper food, and we'd spend hours taking orders. I'm gonna just continue. We've had a sort of a girlhood theme, and so this is a poem that is sort of picks up on that, and it's called Jocks. The back row in American history, already wearing away uniforms under our warm-ups, popping purple gum. Some of us in lipstick stolen from our mothers, others mistaken for our younger brothers with buzz cuts, cornrows, jacked up ponytails. We didn't care about the presidents. We cut out early in a seamless blitz of nylon sheen. Our thighs were staggering, our stretches legendary, counting 4, 5, 6. We swore we saw the bleachers flinch. We licked our palms and rubbed our sneakers clean and couldn't stand the Pentecostal teams with their set shots and culottes. What was worse than modesty? And who could top our coach, destroying clipboards, screaming, "Get your man," whose fury was the only compliment we'd ever trusted. Most of us believed that suffrage meant collective suffering. We weren't discerning, but we weren't unsure. Our trick plays worked. We wore each other's sweat. Our pregnant captain didn't know it yet. Let's see here. So this is, I feel like none of the poems I'm reading require any explanation at all before I read them. This is a poem that's called, it's called Boundaries, and it's about boundaries. Boundaries. Shelley is in therapy, so she talks a lot about boundaries. Her ex, she told me, we were at her new place putting together a complicated puzzle, Rocky Main Harbor at sunset and so forth, experienced her boundaries as a thing to push against. I'm not in therapy, so I'm always thinking about myself. For instance, whether anybody has experienced my boundaries as a thing to push against or at all. I'm not sure how close you need to get before a boundary can be experienced, or if you even know it happens, but I figure pretty close, which isn't easy if you're like me, a minor country, usually consumed with seeming neutral. Shelley called it quits the week her ex was feeding another woman's cat. And I could see how that would do a person in after so many compromises. Or that's what I offered while we sorted out the lighthouse. And I thought some more about the corners I've been backed into so far. How even though I'll open any door for roses or a pamphlet on deliverance, it's only ever me in here, at odds with nothing but my own loose ends, which must be why I have a lot of friends. I'm gonna read two more. This is another of the poems that has hope in it, and it's called Nostos, which of course is a Greek word that means a homecoming of sorts. Nostos. Hope holds her cards so close, I don't know how she voted. I'm afraid to ask. Like me, she's always leaving lives behind, changing her mind about what's feasible. Hope was 7 states away the night her dad got tanked and drove into a ditch, banged up where passersby could see how deep he'd finally spiraled. 2 Thanksgivings later, here we are. Hope thinks some stories dog you your whole life. I think she's right. It's hard to come back home or where home was, where a part of you still partly is, which is why we wind up 2 grown women at the batting cages, the all-day gray, a sort of syntax we're suspended in. I figure we both have a couple kids by now, Hope says. And then, did you ever want to climb inside the bucket on the Bojangles sign? I did, I tell her all the time, and maybe even mean it. When Hope goes in again, I picture us exalted, turned slowly over fryer fumes and traffic, the strip mall sweep of wheezing industry, the concrete where we set our feet, choke up and swing it down the middle pitches we hit easily. It's been forever since I felt so happy. I'm going to read the last one, and it's this is the title poem. I've never had a book with a title poem before, and now I see why people don't do this, because you feel like you always have to read it. But this is a poem based on an experience that I had going to a convention that was for, and this was pre-pandemic, but going to this convention that was for kind of extreme prepper people who are that you could look at seed vaults, and you could look at fallout shelters and all this kind of stuff. It was intense and sort of creepy. And the poem mentions this thing called the glass delusion, which was a kind of fanatical thing that happened during the Middle Ages, where people would believe that their that their skin or their bones was actually made of glass. And then they would take these like extreme measures to protect themselves. So that is mentioned. It's just a small thing, but the survival. Oh, and the place where this expo was called the Agri Center, which I thought was a really great name for a place for a survival expo. The Survival Expo. It's mostly men inside the Agri Center, pricing seed vaults and metal shelters, knives and MREs spread over dressed up tables like alms for fraught apostles. Take, eat. And we expected this, my friend and I, but came in anyway, for fun, I guess. Except to me, it feels a little like a test to prove how out of place we aren't, which I'll acknowledge is a flaw of mine. This tendency to double down, pretending things are fine, a tactical response. Like when my friend tells me she's feeling better, and all I do is compliment her hair, how thick it's growing in, how glad I am. Before I train my focus on the man selling disaster rations meant for pets. Taste tested, he explains, on cats, since dogs will eat whatever, but cats are picky bastards. And see, his pack will hold a month's supply. And here's a pocket for your gas mask, and here's a pamphlet about chemtrails too. But it's the truth. We're sorely unprepared for even minor hazards, acts of God and whatnot. Living as we do along a semi-dormant fault in Tennessee, our billboards lit with shot theology and ads that flash, yes, silencers are legal. So I can understand why there's a line for 20-minute background checks. This being a thoroughly American response to background checks and fear. Compared to, say, the Middle Ages, how King Charles VI, believing he was made of glass, sewed iron bars into his clothes and hardly moved and wouldn't let himself be touched, so scared of shattering, which just goes to show the kingdom of the self will always be the hardest to defend. I wonder what he'd think to see us probing superior illumination, lamps that burn for 40 days and charge your phone, something my friend could use, she tells me, texting a picture to her husband, who responds, I think you ought to leave the Agri Center. But then we get distracted by these cards with punch-out tools that fit inside your wallet. So if you're stranded in the wilderness or captured and have access to your wallet, you might still save yourself. What can it hurt, we say, and stand there for a while comparing options, snare locks, fish hooks, saw blade, handcuff shim. Because you never know what you'll walk into. And the Agri Center smells like kettle corn. And my friend is feeling better, done with chemo. And I don't know what to say, but can't shut up. Just keep reloading wrong words through the last packed aisles and turnstiles back to Saturday. Appalled, of course, but not ungratified by all these ways we have to stay alive. Thanks.
Thank you, Caki. Can't wait to read that. And I don't know what Kevin's going to say, but I think you did an excellent job setting him up. Our last reader is Kevin Wilson. Kevin is the author of 5 books, most recently Nothing to See Here. He teaches at the University of the South and lives in Swanee, Tennessee with his wife, the poet Leigh Anne Couch, and their sons. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I had some funny stuff to say to lead in, and then I've just been crying nonstop hearing everybody read. It's making me feel like I'm back in the Women's Center, and I think about how, I started writing because I was just so lonely, and somehow it worked. Like Wyatt invited me to be on staff, and I met these people, and my whole life changed, right? And no matter what happens with my writing, like the best thing ever was meeting these people. So I'm going to read to continue the theme of girlhood. My novel, which all of my novels have teenage girls. So this is my new novel that I'm working on. That's called We Are Fugitives. And mine's on the screen too. And until Juliana and Cecily said something, I didn't realize it would look creepy or weird. So I've been thinking about that while I've been crying. So, okay, there's no setup. Well, maybe there should be. It's just, it's about a girl who's looking back on this one single summer in 1996 when she meets this boy, and they make this work of art that creates a kind of intense panic in the entire country. And so it's all about this singular summer. Okay. At the Coalfield public pool, they would blow a whistle and everybody had to get out of the pool, and we'd all stand there hopping on one foot and then the other because the concrete was so damn hot, burning the bottoms of our feet. And some lifeguard, barely older than me at 16, looking like the bad guy in a teen movie, blonde and buff and absolutely never going to save you if you were drowning, would wheel out this greased watermelon. There was a 3-inch layer of Vaseline, which made the watermelon shiny, almost like it was turning from a solid into a liquid. And then the lifeguard and one of his evil twins, maybe with crazier muscles and a scuzzy mustache, would dump this watermelon into the water and push it to the middle of the pool. And when they blew their whistles, the point was to jump into the water, and then whoever could get the watermelon to the edge of the pool would win it. You had to team up really to reasonably expect to win the thing. And so the game would turn into a kind of gang war, boys basically beating the shit out of each other, this watermelon slipping and sliding away from them, almost an afterthought. By the time it made it to the edge, the watermelon was covered in gouges from fingernails, the red meat spilling out of it, pretty much inedible to anyone except the person who'd won it. I was smart enough to stay away, though it made me mad that no girls ever really took part, like we were too delicate for things like this. But the only time I tried, when I was 12, some old man with a snake tattoo on his arm elbowed me in the face and nearly knocked out my front teeth. My brothers, the triplets, were perfect for the greased watermelon contest because they were 18 and already giant. They were nearly feral, possessed of a kind of strength that wasn't physical, but a kind of psychosis that made them impervious to pain, which they tested out on each other all the time. But they didn't take part either because they used this time to run around while everyone was occupied and steal money out of unattended purses, grabbing uneaten snacks and sodas to hoard over on the grassy hill behind the pool. I was standing there, my feet blistering, wondering why I didn't just go lie down on my towel and wait for the time when I could wade back safely into the pool and what exactly? Just keep waiting around and around so you could never quite tell that I was alone? Honestly, I wanted to see the fight over this thing. I wanted to hear the shouts and curses. I wanted to see violence. This boy was watching me from across the pool. I could see him, skinny and twitchy, probably about my age. And every single time I caught him looking at me, he'd smile this goofy smile and then stare down at the water. And then I lost sight of him for a second. Any second now, the lifeguards were going to blow their whistles. And then I felt someone touch my elbow, which for some reason felt really intimate and weird. Someone's fingers on my rough, bony elbow. I whirled around and it was that boy. His eyes black, his hair black, his teeth bright white and painfully crooked. Hey, he said, and I pulled my arm away from him. Sorry, he said, I'm sorry, I'm new. I just moved here. I don't know anybody. I'm watching you. It looks like you don't know anybody either. I know everybody, I said, gesturing to the entire congregation of poolgoers. I know them all. I just don't like anybody. He nodded. He understood. Will you help me get this watermelon? He asked. Me? I asked. You and me, he said. I think we can do it. Okay. Sure, I said. All right, he said. What's your name? Frankie, I told him. Cool. I like girls who have boys' names, he told me, like he was the most open-minded boy who had ever lived. Frankie isn't a boy's name. It's unisex. My name is Zeke, he told me. Zeke, I said. Ezekiel, he explained. It's biblical. It's my middle name. I'm trying it out this summer just to see how it sounds. I was looking at him. He wasn't handsome. All of his features were too big, cartoonish, but I wasn't pretty either. I had a really plain face. I convinced myself at the right angle that even though I was plain, it was temporary and soon I'd be pretty. I told myself that I definitely wasn't ugly. My brothers, however, said I was ugly. Whatever. I cared so much, but I put a lot of effort into not caring. I was punk rock. Maybe it was better to be ugly if the alternative was to be plain. The whistle blew, and we were just staring at each other, but then he said, "Come on, we can do this." And he jumped right into the pool. I did not jump into the pool. I just stood there. I watched him bob in the water, and he looked so hurt, and it made me feel really shitty. Finally, he shrugged and started splashing toward the commotion. Zeke tried 2 or 3 times, but he kept getting roughly tossed aside, dunked under the water, and he'd come up gasping, coughing, looking so lost on his own. But he kept climbing over people, trying to get his hands on the watermelon, which was so slippery that no one could really control it. And then somebody kicked him accidentally in the mouth, and I saw that his lip was busted. It was bleeding, dripping into the pool, but the lifeguards did not give a shit. Nothing bad would happen to someone this dumb. Before I could think about it, I was running over. Am I breaking up? I'm sorry. Okay. I was running over to my brother Andrew, who had like 7 bags of Doritos, and I told him I needed his help. Right then, Brian came over, a wad of damp dollar bills in his fist. "Come on, Andrew," he said. "We don't have all day." "I need help," I said. And by this point, Charlie had come over. "I need you to help this boy get the watermelon." "Fuck no," Charlie said. "No way." "Please," I asked them. "I'm sorry, Frankie," Andrew told me, and they started to run off, but I shouted, "I'll give you $20. $20? Brian asked. "No shit." $20, I said. "And what do we do?" "Do you see that nerdy kid in the water?" They all nodded. "Help him get the watermelon," I said. It was pretty simple, but they kept staring at the watermelon. "Are you in love with him?" Charlie asked me. I don't know," I said. "I can't figure it out. I think I feel sorry for him." "Yikes," Andrew said, grimacing like I was cursed. "Fine, we'll do it." And my brothers dropped all the stuff they were carrying and cannonballed into the water. Andrew grabbed Zeke like a rag doll and basically carried him toward the watermelon while Brian and Charlie cleared a path using their elbows, the ferocity of their actions overwhelming the other kids who had been wrestling over the watermelon for long enough that they were starting to tire out. When they got possession of the watermelon, a sorry looking sight, Andrew just threw Zeke onto it, and the triplets pushed him to the edge of the water, Zeke's mouth dripping blood onto the Vaseline. And then it was over. Zeke had won. The lifeguards blew their whistles, and the other kids acted like they didn't care. Their chests and arms were glistening with the grease, and it wasn't coming off in the water, but they just started splashing around, waiting for the girls to get into the pool, the kids in their floaties, the dads with their beer guts and sad tattoos. I walked over to the edge of the pool where Zeke was trying to catch his breath. My brothers had already left. "You did it," I said. "Who were those boys?" he asked, so confused. "My brothers," I told him. "You did this?" I nodded. We both laughed. "Your mouth is bleeding," I told him, but he didn't seem to care. We both looked at the watermelon, which looked like a horror movie. "Will you eat this with me?" he asked. "You're going to fucking eat that?" I asked. "We're gonna eat it," he said, smiling. And we did. We really did. And it was so good. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. That was awesome. You were all amazing. Can we all unmute for just a second and do a round of applause?
Yay!
Wonderful, wonderful.
Rooms, nursery emergency bedrooms, room service included, check-ins daily.
What's that? Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That was really, really great and lovely to be with you all again. Now, do we have questions? Gwen will happily read questions that you put in the chat, or you're welcome to put up your hand virtually and ask your question out loud. I'll start with a question. I'll throw out a question that we've been hearing a lot of people ask at these readings. How are you all doing with writing in the pandemic? Are people getting writing done or not? Is the moment making its way into your work at all? Question is for anyone.
Meh. Meh. Meh.
Well, yeah, I've been writing a journal of the plague year that I just finished. I mean, it just went a year, but yeah, so the plague's been good for me. And plus, we've spent a lot of time together, Sharon and I. So yeah, it's been good. I've really liked it. I mean, other than the plague itself, but yeah.
Come on, Buzz.
I mean, everything that I write is set in 1996, so I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And but what was interesting is right at the start of the pandemic, Caki and I started a imaginary basketball league. We bought a basketball simulator, and we ran through the season that had ended. And it was this kind of again, just this way like to imagine that nothing had changed, and to watch like Steph Curry score 50 points a game. So it was kind of lovely, but I haven't written shit. So no, it hasn't affected it in that way.
Erica Dawson has a question in the chat, staff. What time is the ice fight? For those of you who don't know, that became a tradition. I think after I was on staff, I don't remember participating in an ice fight, but receptions would end with everybody throwing ice at each other. That's the name.
That's mostly Kevin.
It's mostly Kevin.
Kevin's extremely aggressive and violent. Still recovering.
Hi, Erica.
Her hands would be all red and frozen and angry. And
Yep.
Elwood Reed hit me in the mouth with a piece of ice and cut my lip. And then I gave Carrie Gerald a black eye right before her reading.
Yep.
Good times.
All very mature.
Yeah.
Very, very mature.
Good times.
Okay, we've lost the thread of the Q&A a little bit. This is not a very professional Q&A, sorry.
Sorry, everybody.
Cecily, where are you in the manuscript you're working on?
Oh, I think I'm done. I think speaking about the pandemic, I did write some pandemic poems. I am almost never alone during the pandemic, and so it has been hard to write. So my solution is to like rent an Airbnb in my neighborhood and go away for a weekend. So I've written a few pandemic poems, and those found their way into the manuscript. And yeah, I think I'm done. I think I just need to now find a home for it, which is exciting and daunting all at the same time.
Do we feel safer now? Do we feel like we're finally coming out of it? You know, I feel like I can move around a little bit more.
I get my second shot on Monday, and I think 2 weeks after that, I'll feel a lot safer. But for those of you who don't know, and I know we had some people on here who are visitors to the conference. I haven't started writing those yet. We are having the conference this year. Because of the rapid spread of vaccinations, and we'll have a lot of precautions, but we're going to go ahead.
I feel comfortable going to the grocery store for more than 10 minutes. That's the big excitement of being vaccinated, have the 2 shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so wonderful to see all of y'all.
It is. It's so great. Yeah. So glad we did this. Yeah.
And wonderful poems, which y'all have been writing as long as I've known you, which is a good long time now. And Kevin, I go back to the rabbit story. That still remains one of my favorite ones with the frozen baby bunnies. But thank you, Leigh Anne and Gwen, for putting this all together. This was great.
I'm going to miss wearing my mask.
Smiling under that thing, Wyatt.
Yeah, gotten into that, huh?
Yeah. I
You
think
know,
it's
you
all
could
right.
just keep it up, you know. I don't think anyone will
Yeah.
complain.
Well, I might change them around a little bit, Jennifer, so don't be shocked when I walk in.
Wyatt's always been a little bit of a freak. So
I was going to say, I don't think that you can shock me anymore, Wyatt.
Okay.
I have a question. What was the first year that each of you were on staff?
I joined in 95.
And I joined in 96.
99.
That was a good year. I had a baby then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A long damn time ago is the answer.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think I was like 2003 or 4.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Yeah. And there are other staffers here. Jake is here.
That was 2006. That was my year. I think Jake was a couple years after me, maybe 2000.
Caki and I were actually never on staff together, but in my head we were. I'm just and Erica.
Yeah, it was just one big summer.
Yeah. Erica, what year did you start?
Very long.
2002.
Oh, okay.
2002.
Wow. See, in my head, we were on staff together many more years than we actually were. Oh, we have a for real question from Pradeep. Leigh Anne, you touched on two of my favorites, Montali and Casablanca. I have always felt a deep visual resonance with your work. Could you talk about the cover of your new book?
Okay. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a wonderful, and I actually don't know the term for it, but it's a photograph by a wonderful artist named Kat Cohn, who Pradeep actually introduced me to. And I looked at her work online, and most of her work isn't like this, but this is a superposition of two photographs, and these are old photographs. So there's one, it's a profile, and then a forward picture, and they come together with the lips in the center. And then she's touched it up with color, and I just love it. They're two children, and you can't tell if they're male or female. And it was really wonderful to discover this artist, to kind of discover resonance with another artist that I'd never even known before. And now we write back and forth to each other. She writes poetry. And the same thing happened with my first book, with the art of the cover. And I'm just lucky for both of these publishers that they allowed me to have such a big hand in choosing the cover. So if you like this work, please check her out. She lives in Burlington, Vermont, one of my favorite places, Kat Cohn. So thanks for asking that, Pradeep.
Hey, you're welcome, Leigh Anne. Thank you. And I'd just love to know more. I'll dig deeper, or ask you to dig deeper. What were you thinking? Was there a particular poem that made you pick this image? Or I'm just curious as to the inner workings of the poetic mind when it connects to the visual world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think what I've always been fascinated with in poetry, I think what drew me to poetry first was the idea of doubleness in language. I've always loved a good pun. And beyond that, I love etymology. And so when I look at a dictionary and I look up words, and there's so many layers to that, that's often where my poems come from. And it branches into the nether regions from there, but sometimes it starts with just one word. And so the doubleness of this image and the sort of darkness at the mouths was something that, I don't know, it resonated with me. And the fact that they're children was important to me too. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a question before we let our wonderful readers go have a well-deserved drink, maybe, or TV show or podcast? Or
Leah, thank you so much. Leah was really the one that put this together, and she is the queen of good ideas, the king of good ideas. I mean, many of you might know this story, but Kevin and I would not be together if it weren't for Leah.
That's true.
It was all her idea.
Yep.
So thank you.
We were actually, it happened at the conference, and I
Yes.
started saying they should go down to the courthouse and get married.
Yeah.
A few years later, they got married. So those are the powers that I have.
The slow burn.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Gwen and Leanne and Caki. Congratulations on the books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Caki's poems are just amazing. I cannot wait to read this book.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, hey, Jay.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did your cover come from?
It's the same artist who did the cover for the Winona book. So she's great. She reads the book and then she does, she draws the things.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.